Magnus Carlsen returns to over-the-board chess for the first time in almost a month. He pulled out of the Sinquefield Cup on the 4th of September. It's now the 3rd of October and he's back at the board in Austria playing in the European Club Championships. So I'm going to switch tabs quickly here. You can see the club he's playing for, the Offerspill Chess Club, his Norwegian chess club. And okay, there's other European clubs. It's a team event, 7-round Swiss, and they're playing each other. There's a lot of other stars involved, like Anand Gukesh. They're in a team together. Some other 2,700 players. And by the way, this tweet here is quite funny really. So it was posted by Mr. Dodgy and he said just a few boards between the pairing of Maximum Chaos. So what he's referencing here is Carlsen and a player called Sebastian Feller. Now Feller was convicted of cheating about 10 years ago in 2012, a French player. He was banned for a period of time, almost 3 years. He's then played some chess since, not a lot from what I can see in chessgames.com, but okay, he's back playing at the board, but we can see he's playing board 1 there. So if Magnus's team get paired up with them, I mean, what will they do? Will Magnus play this guy? Will he be okay with that? Will they switch up the board order on Magnus's team? No idea really, but interesting one. The other thing I want to quickly say, shout out here to Hugh Murphy here playing for the Sharks for NCL, if you can see my cursor. So I've known Hugh for years, played a lot of chess with him. I literally just saw his name, so he's also in action in this event. I was just having a chat with him. Anyway, on to the chess. So let me switch back to here. So Carlsen had the black pieces today. He was playing against Nikita Meshkovs, a Latvian GM. Let's see what happened. So d4 was played, knight f6, c4, e6 from Carlsen, knight to f3, very common, avoiding knight c3 and bishop b4, mainline Nimzo-Indian stuff. Carlsen goes d5 and now g3. Interesting. Playing a Catalan against Mr. Catalan right now, Magnus Carlsen. So Carlsen checks. This is a very common idea. The bishop blocks, then the bishop retreats. So what's the whole point of this losing of a tempo for black? Well, white has to also lose a tempo later on, bringing the bishop to a good diagonal. So it's kind of neither here nor there. Bishop g2 now played. c6 from Magnus, very solid. Queen c2, there could be a threat sometimes to take and go b5, cementing the pawn. So the queen keeps an eye on that one. Both players now castle. Magnus goes b6, preparing to develop his light squared bishop. And now bishop f4, white develops that piece as I was mentioning. So the bishop now comes to a6, pressures this pawn. So white captures on d5, pawn recaptures, and now the rook comes to c1. We can see both players delaying the development of their knights here. Very interesting opening struggle. So white's the first to the c-file, good pressure. The knight can't come to this desirable square. So it comes to d7 instead. Now this one develops to c3, and now knight h5 from Magnus. He goes after this bishop here on f4. We had a ding game from here where the bishop landed on e5. But this time we had queen a4 immediately here. So it attacks this unprotected piece here. Magnus trades here. The queen captures here. And now Magnus takes on g2. So the king recaptures. Fairly level position. But white does have the edge here because they're the first one to the open file. And you've got a superior knight on c3 to this one on d7. So queen c8 from Magnus now. Best move in the position. Challenges the powerful influence of that queen over the c-file. White exchanges. That is the best move. Rook recaptures. And now this knight b5 is just a bit uncomfortable. For example, you'd love to go pawn a6. How many of us would do that in a blitz game? But then the knight can hop into c7 here. You hit this rook, hit this pawn, and if you try rook a7 to stay with the defense of the pawn, well then can you see the nice tactic here for the white player, all to do with the undefended rook. Loose pieces drop off, as they say. It's knight takes on d5. Now this tactic would not be working if the king was on g1 and you could take here with check. But because you can't, now white can throw in the Zwischenzug, take the bishop with check, king moves. Now you're going to lose that knight, so you can chuck it here with check, pawn recaptures, you double those ones up, rook takes back, and okay, you're a pawn ahead and you're on the open file, very good advantage. So running it back here, instead of pawn to a6, Magnus actually goes rook to d8. Ugly looking move, he comes off the open file, he cedes it, but it wasn't so easy to actually find good moves there. Now we had knight c7 anyway, the rook comes to b8, and now the rook comes to c6, preparing to double. So Magnus is worse here. Rook b7, just pressures that knight, maybe prepares to challenge the file one day if it can be arranged, but knight a6 now came. g5 from Magnus, gains space, he's looking to push g4, and now white doubles on the file. So a nice domination for white at the moment, a very kind of Magnus-esque position. g4 played, kicks this knight back, it's coming into d3, then maybe e5 later on. Magnus comes with knight to f6, looking at this e4 square, knight d3, and now bishop d6 from Magnus, very logical improvement of that piece. You look at this square, you look at this square, and now here, white just goes wrong. So when we look at these rooks on the open file, they're both better pieces than the black rooks here. So the best way to play was with something like h3, which we see later on. Now Magnus supports that pawn later on. You could have an exchange here, and then pawn b4 is nice. You can actually run this pawn all the way to b5. Then you can actually prepare something like knight back and into c6. There's just really nice options here to massage the position. Rook h1, maybe you switch back. You know, just slow play, make black sweat. But here the black player just rushes the position. So they go rook to c8 immediately, but this allows Magnus to swap one of these dangerous rooks, king to g7, and now this pawn comes to h3, h5, takes, and now the knight drops back to b4. There's no pawn b4 coming to b5, clamping on c6, etc. So some of that pressure which white had has just been alleviated. Pawn a5, and now the position's basically just level, even though Magnus is a little bit more cramped than the white player. So the knight hops to c6. It might come to e5 one day. Knight back to d7, pawn a4 played, king into f6 here, and now pawn a3 challenges the bind of this pawn. Magnus takes, pawn takes back, king g7, king f2, not so easy for either player to improve. This knight comes back to f6, now pawn g4, rook c7, and here we start seeing some liquidation of pieces, tough for either player to make progress. The knight comes back to e8, knight a7, bishop b8, hits the knight, it bounces back into b5, this knight comes back to f6, and we can see that neither player is really able to make much progress here. We see a few more kind of shuffling moves. The knight comes back, covers this pawn, knight g8, and here we see this repetition of moves. The game ended peacefully in a draw. But this is a bad result for Magnus, because this guy's 25.66, Nikita Meshkov's. Magnus is 300 points higher rated, so on the live rating lists, he's just lost about 3.4 rating points with this loss. He's in the low 2850s now, a mere 2852. You know, he could be dropping into the 2840s. So that dream of 2900 is looking a long way away right now, having lost to Hans Niemann and now drawn this game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you want to see the game with Hans Niemann that was played a month ago, the last time Magnus was at the board, then do see the video on screen. Hit that subscribe button if you never want to miss a future video, and thanks very much for watching. See you soon.